Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that's been brewing inside me for a long, long time. It's a story about coming home, confronting the past, and finding your voice in the most unexpected ways. It's about how my old teacher spent an hour humiliating me for dropping out of school, not knowing that I dropped out to run a $10 million company. Let's set the scene, shall we? Picture this: a small town, the kind where everyone knows your name, your family history, and every single perceived misstep you've ever made. For me, that misstep was dropping out of high school. Yeah, I know, it sounds cliché, right? The rebel, the one who didn't fit in. But for me, it wasn't about rebellion. It was about survival, about seeing a different path, a faster, more direct route to where I knew I needed to be. I left high school not because I was failing, but because I was already building something significant, something that, within a few short years, would become a thriving $10 million enterprise. Now, you might be asking, why keep that a secret? Why not shout it from the rooftops? Well, in a town like mine, success can be a double-edged sword. It can attract admiration, sure, but it can also attract envy, resentment, and a whole new breed of bullies. I'd seen it happen to others. I'd experienced enough of it in school to know that laying bare my achievements would not only make me a target but potentially put my family, who still lived there, in an uncomfortable spotlight. So, I kept my head down, maintained a low profile whenever I visited, and let the town continue to believe I was just the dropout, the one who didn't quite make it. It was a strange kind of protective shield, built on a lie of omission. My company, my life, my accomplishments, they were a world away, a secret empire I built brick by brick, far from the judging eyes of my hometown. Life was good, busy, exhilarating, constantly challenging, but deeply fulfilling. I was living the dream I'd sketched out on napkins in my teenage years, the one that had seemed impossible to everyone but me. But despite all the success, all the board meetings, the product launches, the international travel, there was always a tiny, almost imperceptible knot of apprehension whenever I thought about returning home. That feeling of being an outsider, of carrying the unspoken judgment of a community that valued traditional paths above all else, never fully left me. It was a scar, healed but still sensitive to the touch. And then came the reason to return: my younger sister, Lily. Lily was everything I wasn't in high school. Bright, studious, a natural leader, and deeply committed to her academic journey. She was the golden child, the one who stayed on the traditional path, excelled at it, and was now being recognized for her achievements at the annual school awards ceremony. My heart swelled with pride every time I thought of her. She was my anchor, my best friend, and the one person who truly understood the sacrifices I'd made, even if she didn't fully grasp the scale of my success. She knew I was doing something big but respected my need for discretion. So, there I was, back in the hallowed halls of Northwood High. The same drab lockers, the same scent of stale gym socks and floor wax, the same slightly oppressive silence punctuated by distant cheers from the sports field. My stomach fluttered with a mix of nostalgia and dread. I tried to be inconspicuous, dressed in a simple, well-tailored dress that screamed successful professional but whispered, "Don't look at me." I slipped into the back row of the auditorium, hoping to blend into the shadows, witness Lily's triumph, and then make a swift, quiet exit. The lights dimmed, the principal began his opening remarks, and I allowed myself a moment of peace, a quiet smile as I watched my sister beam from the stage. Everything felt normal. For a fleeting moment, I was just a proud older sister, not a CEO with a secret. That feeling of peace shattered the instant I heard my name. Not a polite acknowledgement, but a sharp, almost sneering tone cutting through the polite applause. "Well, well, well, if it isn't Anna. What a surprise to see you here." My blood ran cold. I knew that voice. It belonged to Mrs. Albright, my former English teacher. She had always been particularly fond of pointing out my lack of focus and wasted potential. I tried to shrink further into my seat, willing myself to become invisible. But it was too late. Her eyes, sharp and unforgiving, had locked onto mine. A hush fell over the small section of the audience around me as heads began to turn. The spotlight, it seemed, had found me. Mrs. Albright, a woman whose stern demeanor was legendary, now walked down the aisle, her gaze fixed on me like a predator. "Fancy seeing you here, Anna," she said, loud enough for several rows to hear. "Still gracing us with your presence, even after, well, after you decided that school wasn't quite for you." Her words, though seemingly innocuous, were laced with a venomous implication. I was a failure, an anomaly, a bad example. My cheeks burned. I could feel the weight of every eye on me, the quiet whispers starting to ripple through the audience. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of shame and fear. I just wanted to disappear, to melt into the worn velvet seat. But it didn't stop there. Oh no, it was just the beginning. Like a pack of wolves sensing weakness, other teachers started to converge. Mr. Harrison, my old math teacher, a man whose patience had always been as thin as his hair, approached with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Still can't balance a checkbook, I imagine, Anna," he quipped, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It's a shame, really. All that potential, just squandered." He then proceeded to quiz me on basic algebra, right there in the middle of the aisle, as if I were a remedial student needing public correction. "What's the square root of 81, Anna? No calculator, now." The humiliation was excruciating. My mind, usually sharp and quick, felt blank. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because the sheer audacity of the public shaming had paralyzed me. Then came Principal Thompson, a man who projected an air of authority but whose compassion had always been in short supply. He stepped forward, not to intervene on my behalf, but to reinforce the narrative. "This is precisely why we stress the importance of education, folks," he announced to the wider audience, gesturing vaguely in my direction, "to avoid alternative paths that often lead to regret and limited opportunities." He used me standing there, mortified, as a cautionary tale, a living, breathing example of what not to become. The irony was so thick, I could almost taste it, but the burning shame overshadowed any thought of defiance. Mrs. Albright, clearly enjoying her moment, circled back. "It's just such a pity," she purred, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You had such a keen mind, Anna. Imagine what you could have achieved if you'd just stayed, instead of, well, whatever it is you're doing now. Probably just scraping by, I imagine." Her words were a direct assault on my character, my intelligence, my entire life since leaving their hallowed halls. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. But the worst was yet to come. Mr. Davies, my former history teacher, a man known for his volatile temper, joined the fray. He leaned in, his breath smelling faintly of coffee and stale cigarettes. "Anna," he began, his voice low and menacing, "some people just aren't cut out for success. They take the easy way out, then wonder why life passes them by." And then, in a move that still makes my stomach churn, he pulled a pair of small, sharp scissors from his pocket, the kind teachers use for craft projects. Before I could even react, he reached out and, with a sickening snip, cut a chunk of hair from the side of my head. It wasn't a clean cut, it was jagged, uneven, a crude act of violation. The shock was immediate, the feeling of vulnerability overwhelming. A gasp rippled through the audience. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. As if that wasn't enough, Mr. Davies then took a carton of orange juice from a nearby table, one of the refreshments for the award winners. Without a word, he poured it directly over my head. The sticky, cold liquid streamed down my hair, my face, soaking my dress. It clung to my skin, mixing with the tears that were now freely falling. And then, as I stood there, dripping and stunned, he raised his hand and slapped me across the face. Hard. The sting was immediate, a sharp, burning pain that echoed the deeper wound in my heart. My head snapped back, and I stumbled, nearly falling. The auditorium, which had been buzzing with whispers, fell into an almost complete silence. It was a stunned, horrified silence. The physical assault, so brazen in public, had finally crossed a line. But even then, Principal Thompson didn't step in to help me. Instead, he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, and pulled me roughly towards the side exit. "You've caused enough of a scene, Anna," he hissed, his voice low and threatening. "Don't make things worse for yourself. Just leave quietly." He was trying to sweep it under the rug, to make me disappear before the full extent of their monstrous behavior could be witnessed. Just as he was about to shove me out the door, a furious voice cut through the air. "Leave her alone." "What are you doing?" It was Lily. My sister. She had seen it all. Her face was a mask of shock and incandescent rage. She ran towards me, pushing past the principal with surprising force. She runs a company. Lily screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. A big one. A $10 million company. She's not a failure, you are. She was trying to defend me, to reveal the truth, but her words were met with dismissive laughter from the teachers. Oh, bless her heart, Mrs. Albright scoffed. Still dreaming, just like her sister. Such a vivid imagination. They thought it was a desperate lie, a child's fantasy. Lily, however, wasn't deterred. She wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight, her body trembling with anger and protectiveness. We're leaving, she declared, her voice firm despite her tears. And you're all going to pay for this. She led me, half stumbling, out of the auditorium and into the cool evening air. The juice was sticky, my hair was a mess, and my cheek throbbed, but her fierce loyalty was a lifeline. The world outside felt surreal. Lily immediately pulled out her phone. We need to document this, she said, her voice shaking but resolute. Every single detail. We drove straight to the nearest emergency clinic. The staff there, seeing my disheveled appearance, the juice-soaked hair, the red mark on my cheek, and the jacket cut, were immediately concerned. They took photos, documented my injuries, and provided a medical report. I felt a strange detachment, as if I was watching it all happen to someone else. The physical pain was real, but the emotional wound was far deeper, a raw, gaping chasm. From the clinic, we called the police. Filing the report was difficult, recounting the humiliation and assault, but Lily stayed by my side, her hand clasped firmly in mine. The initial officer seemed a bit skeptical, probably thinking it was just a schoolyard spat. But once he saw the medical report, the photos, and the clear evidence of physical assault, his demeanor changed. This was no longer just a school matter. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and meetings. As soon as I was able to think clearly, I reached out to Paula Robinson, a formidable lawyer I'd worked with on a few corporate matters. She was known for her sharp intellect and no-nonsense approach. When I recounted the story, her initial shock quickly turned to steely determination. This is utterly unacceptable, she stated, her voice calm but firm. We will make sure they regret this. I also contacted Jamal Baker, a PR expert whose services my company occasionally used. With a $10 million company, any public scandal, even one where I was the victim, could have repercussions. Jamal immediately understood the delicate balance. We need to control the narrative, he advised, before they try to spin it against you. He started preparing statements, anticipating media inquiries, and outlining a strategy to protect my reputation and, by extension, my company's. Under Paula's guidance, we filed a formal complaint with the school district. It was a thick document, detailing every insult, every physical assault, every threat. We included the medical reports, the police report, and even a few grainy phone videos that Lily had managed to find online. Apparently, some students had recorded parts of the ceremony, capturing snippets of the teacher's behavior. We also started gathering witness statements from parents and students who had been present and horrified by the spectacle. The district's initial response was predictable: damage control. They involved teachers. Mrs. Albright, Mr. Harrison, and Mr. Davies were suspended with pay. Principal Thompson received a formal reprimand. It felt like a slap on the wrist, a way for the district to appease us without truly acknowledging the severity of the situation. I could almost hear their collective sigh of relief, thinking they had diffused the situation. But then, something truly infuriating happened. The teachers, in a brazen display of victimhood, started a GoFundMe page. They claimed they were being unfairly targeted, that I was a disgruntled former student fabricating claims, and that they needed legal funds to defend their unblemished careers. The audacity of it made my blood boil. It fueled my resolve even further. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about systemic arrogance and the abuse of power. Paula immediately moved to get a temporary restraining order issued against the teachers, prohibiting them from contacting me or Lily. It was a small victory, a legal barrier that gave me a sliver of peace, but the emotional scars remained raw. Then came the real turning point. The prosecutor's office, after reviewing all the evidence, including the medical reports and witness statements, decided to press criminal charges. Mr. Davies, the history teacher who had cut my hair, poured juice on me, and slapped me, was officially charged with assault. This was no longer just a civil matter. This was a criminal act, and the law was finally stepping in. It was a moment of profound vindication, a clear signal that their actions had consequences far beyond a mere suspension. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering, public relations strategy, and deeply personal introspection. The school district, facing a potential full-blown lawsuit, criminal charges against one of its employees, and increasing negative media attention, finally blinked. They offered mediation. It was their attempt to settle things quietly, to minimize the damage, to make it all go away. For me, this wasn't just about personal compensation. Not anymore. My company was thriving. I didn't need their money. This was about something much bigger. This was about using my voice, my resources, and my experience to create real, lasting change. I remembered Principal Thompson's words, using me as a cautionary tale. Well, I was going to be a cautionary tale for them, too. My lawyers, Paula and her team, were ready for a fight, but I laid out my demands clearly. First, I wanted a significant portion of the settlement money, not for myself, but to establish a scholarship fund, a scholarship specifically for students who chose non-traditional paths, who didn't fit the mold, who pursued vocational training, entrepreneurship, or creative arts instead of a 4-year degree. I wanted to call it the Pathfinder Scholarship. It was a direct rebuttal to every narrow-minded insult I'd endured. It was about telling future students that their unique journey was valid, valuable, and worthy of support. Second, I demanded tangible policy changes within the school district. I wanted a clear, unambiguous code of conduct that explicitly prohibited physical contact between staff and students or visitors, and a mandatory sensitivity training program for all faculty and staff. This wasn't just about preventing another incident like mine. It was about fostering a culture of respect and empathy. And third, I wanted genuine apologies. Not just a boilerplate legal statement, but a heartfelt, public acknowledgement of their wrongdoing from the teachers involved. This, I knew, would be the hardest part. The mediation session was intense. Paula and Jamal were incredible, navigating the legal minefield with precision. The district's lawyers tried every trick in the book to dilute the demands, especially the language of the apology. They wanted vague regret. I wanted specific accountability. We argued for hours over every single word, every comma. It wasn't about winning a legal battle, it was about winning a moral one. I refused to budge. I held firm, my resolve unshakable. This wasn't just about my past, it was about protecting countless futures. Just when the negotiations seemed to be at an impasse over the apology wording, a surprising request came through. Mr. Harrison, the math teacher, asked for a private meeting with me. Just him and me, with our respective lawyers present, of course. My initial reaction was apprehension. What could he possibly want? Another insult. A last-ditch effort to save face. But something in his request, a hint of vulnerability relayed by his lawyer, made me agree. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a sliver of remorse beneath the hardened exterior. The private meeting with Mr. Harrison was unexpected. We sat across a polished mahogany table in a sterile conference room, the air thick with unspoken tension. His lawyer was there, and Paul, of course, the silent sentinel by my side. Mr. Harrison, usually so rigid and unyielding, looked utterly exhausted. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes shadowed. He started slowly, his voice raspy. He didn't make excuses for his behavior, not really. Instead, he spoke of burnout, of the immense pressure of teaching in an underfunded system, of feeling like a failure himself when students didn't succeed. He admitted that he saw me, the dropout, as a symbol of his own frustrations, a projection of his own perceived shortcomings. He said he was sorry, truly sorry, not just for the public humiliation, but for the pain he had inflicted, for failing to see me as a person, as a young woman with her own path, rather than just a statistic. It wasn't a full absolution, not by any means. The damage was done. The memory of his cruel math quiz, the public shaming, would forever be etched in my mind. But in that moment, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, hearing his raw honesty, I felt a flicker of something akin to understanding. Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice steady, I hear your apology. I accept your apology for your part in what happened. But I need you to understand that while your words matter, they don't erase the pain. They don't erase the fear or the humiliation. My path was valid, and your judgment, and the actions of the other teachers, were deeply harmful. I hope you learn from this, not just for your own sake, but for the sake of every student who walks through those doors. It was a moment of shared humanity, a recognition of his pain, but also a firm reiteration of my own boundaries and the gravity of his actions. The consequences for the teachers were varied. Principal Thompson was reassigned to a purely administrative role, stripped of all student-facing responsibilities. It was a demotion, a quiet removal from power, a clear message from the district that his leadership was no longer deemed fit for student interaction. Mrs. Albright, the English teacher, and Mr. Davies, the history teacher, were required to undergo extensive sensitivity training and were placed under strict, ongoing supervision. Their careers, once seemingly untouchable, were now effectively stalled, their reputations irrevocably tarnished. Mr. Davies still faced criminal charges for assault, a separate legal battle that would likely follow him for years. The Pathfinder Scholarship was established with the settlement funds, a substantial amount that would ensure its longevity. It was designed to provide financial support and mentorship to students pursuing alternative paths, whether it was starting a small business, attending a trade school, or pursuing a career in the arts. To my immense pride, Lily was appointed to the selection committee. Her passion for empowering young people, coupled with her unwavering support for me, made her the perfect choice. It was a beautiful full-circle moment. My own recovery was ongoing. The trauma of that day wasn't something that simply vanished with a legal settlement. I continued therapy, processing the emotional fallout, learning to trust again, and reinforcing my own sense of self-worth. Lily also found a small measure of healing. She was immediately transferred out of Mrs. Albright's English class and into a much more supportive environment with a teacher who genuinely cared. The school district, true to our agreement, implemented a new, comprehensive code of conduct. It explicitly stated that physical contact between staff and students or visitors was strictly prohibited, and it outlined clear disciplinary actions for violations. Mandatory training sessions were rolled out for all employees, emphasizing respect, empathy, and the importance of supporting diverse student pathways. It was a tangible, systemic change, a direct result of what had happened to me. Months later, the first Pathfinder Scholarship Awards ceremony was held. I attended, of course, but anonymously. I sat in the back, observing, a quiet smile on my face, hearing the stories of the first scholarship recipients, a young woman starting a graphic design business, a young man pursuing a career as an automotive technician, another who was going to culinary school, filled me with a profound sense of purpose. I heard parents thank the anonymous donor, their voices thick with emotion, grateful for the opportunity their children were being given. It was a quiet triumph, a powerful validation that my fight had not been in vain. It was a moment where the weight of the past finally began to lift, replaced by the lightness of hope for the future. The incident, painful as it was, irrevocably changed my relationship with Lily. We were always close, but now our bond was forged in fire. She didn't just see me as her older sister, she saw me as a warrior, a CEO who fought for justice not just for herself, but for others. She proudly introduces me now, not just as my sister, but as my sister, the CEO. And she says it with a sparkle in her eye that tells me she finally understands the full scope of what I built and the strength it took to do it. My company, as you can imagine, continued to thrive. We'd hit new milestones, launched new products, and expanded into new markets. The experience of fighting for justice, of standing up to bullies, only sharpened my resolve and my leadership skills. I no longer feel the need to hide my success from anyone. The small-town judgment still exists, of course, but it no longer holds any power over me. I am confident in my path, in my choices, and in the person I've become. Looking back, it's a strange realization, but those teachers, in their cruelty, inadvertently gave me the greatest gift. They gave me the opportunity to create a lasting legacy, the chance to turn profound adversity into meaningful change. The new policies in the school district will help protect countless students from similar humiliation and abuse. The Pathfinder Scholarship will empower future generations to pursue their dreams, regardless of whether they fit into a traditional academic box. I used my resources, my voice, and my experience to ensure that what happened to me would not happen to anyone else. It was a painful journey, one I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, but it was also a journey of empowerment, of finding my voice, and of shaping a future where passion and unconventional paths are celebrated, not shamed. And that, my friends, is a legacy worth more than any $10 million company. So, as you walk your own path, whatever it may be, remember this: your worth is not defined by external validation, nor by the narrow expectations of others. Embrace your unique journey. Stand firm in your convictions. And if you ever find yourself facing down judgment or adversity, know that within every challenge lies the potential for profound transformation, not just for yourself, but for the world you touch. Use your voice, use your strength, and build the legacy you truly believe in. Thank you for listening.